evening, folks. Wednesday, 16th of February 2011, 2 minutes past 9 o'clock. Welcome to some more Mr. C's Curative Thoughts. I'll be with you shortly.
Well, if you believe in freedom, you better start listening to TNS Radio. This is Rick Simpson, and thank you for listening.
Stay tuned to tnsradio.com. My name is Albert Burgess.
This is Nassim Harmain, and you're listening to TNS Radio, the radio of our future.
Yes, good evening. This is Steve, aka Mr. C, coming to you live through tnsradio.com on this Wednesday, February the 16th. Just like to pick up on a couple of points that Pondman left off on his Ripples from the Pond show last night, with regards to a couple of the plants he mentioned anyway. I do believe he also mentioned goji berries, which I don't actually know the homeopathic benefits of, if any. So one I must look into, but certainly he also mentioned yarrow, millefolium, which I just thought I'd read you some of the repertory on that particular plant. And the point of doing these links is that the plants that Pondman's referring to on his Tuesday Ripples from the Pond show are ones that, if not readily available, can at least be grown in our countries, in this climate we all share. And if you're growing it, other than eating it, of course, there's a lot of plants and herbs that are very medicinal in their properties. And yarrow, I'll just read you a little excerpt here. An invaluable remedy for various types of hemorrhages, with the blood bright red. It's good for operations, for gallstones, etc., and has been used for the bad effects from a fall from height, and overlifting and continued high temperatures. One of the symptoms is vertigo when moving slowly, a sensation as if you've forgotten something, and the head seems full of blood. For nosebleeds, from hemorrhages from the bowels, female menses related issues, respiratory problems. It's a good homeopathic remedy, and of course in its raw form has its benefits as well. The other plant Pondman commented on, which I believe was a carry on from my show last week, the good old cannabis plant. I think in this case it was a sativa, although they're both certainly used in the homeopathic world, both as in the other one being cannabis indica. And interestingly enough, the repertory notes for sativa are noticeably different from that of indica. Cannabis sativa, at least as far as the repertory is concerned, is known as hemp, and your cannabis indica is known as hashish. And while the hemp seems to affect particularly the urinary, sexual and respiratory organs, hashish inhibits the higher faculties and stimulates the imagination to a remarkable degree without any marked stimulation of the lower or animal instincts. And I found that quite interesting. But so much for the homeopathic part. What I want to do is jump right now to a more practical part of some of my learnings over the years in regards to the alternative medicines, and I'd really like for anyone hearing those words, alternative, not to focus too much on the alternative, because you'll find it's been implanted somewhere along the way several hundred times that alternative and medicine just doesn't go together. So medicines nonetheless of various shapes and sizes, but a very important and extremely easy to practice one I'd like to share with you right now, so that you can actually practice it as the show goes on, and for that matter carrying it on into your daily lives. It is extremely beneficial, and it'll form part of some more exercises in regards to this particular area that I'll be covering in a future show. But what I'd like you to do right now, without consciously altering how you're actually doing it, is just become aware of your breathing, in particular your chest and whereabouts you feel the air in your chest entering to when you inhale. And what I'm going to run through with you now is I think it's primarily a yogic practice, forms part of the pranayama discipline in yoga, which involves the breath and the means in which you take it. And quite simply speaking, without going into any great depths, because I think the information is more important than the long-winded philosophical descriptions. The technique I'd like you to adopt is when you inhale through the nose. For those of you that don't have completely blocked sinuses, that is. Inhale through the nose, and as you inhale, just gently push your stomach outwards, and what you'll notice is that the breath is drawn in to a deeper part of the lungs. It actually allows the lower lungs to fill up with air, which generally speaking, unless you're a practitioner of yoga or meditation or self-hypnosis or whatever, you'll probably find you're only actually doing when you enter into sleep at night. But it is, however, an extremely efficient way to breathe, and in our current polluted climate, it's worthwhile obtaining as much of the oxygen as we can from our atmosphere, bearing in mind that our breathing process as we exhale isn't just carrying out the air that we haven't actually used up as we inhale, it's also exhaling a lot of toxins that our lungs have filtered out to the air. And a very good mental image that you can adopt more effectively in a more relaxed state, but you can adopt it at any time. I tend to reserve it for the pretty rare, in all honesty, occasion where I do give the old meditative realm a visit, and I mean that in the least spiritual sense I can. But as you inhale, and if you're not driving a car, it's good to close your eyes to make the visualization. If you imagine that you're inhaling all the positive parts that the cosmos has to offer you in the form of a white mist, and take this mist deep into your lungs. Remember, as you breathe in, just gently, it's nothing too excessive, push your stomach out as you breathe in. It's actually a natural process. It's only our day-to-day stresses, and perhaps when you're vigorously exercising, the need to breathe quicker and slightly higher up the lungs, that you wouldn't want to be doing this. But if you imagine that you're taking in this positive air and allowing it to filter through your body and reach every distant part, right the way down to the ends of the toes and the fingers, and even the very ends of the hair follicles themselves. When you inhale this truly beneficial ether. And when you exhale, what you're doing is you're going to imagine that you're exhaling a dark grey breath, and in that breath will be all the negative waste energy that your body no longer requires. And you can attach to that breath anything that might be niggling you in the way of psychological matter. Just break it down. Every time you inhale, part of that's going away. And without thinking about it too much, it's a very easy practice to adopt. That will start to improve our health. Just doing that and no more. And in the back of your mind, it's a good idea just to keep on breathing like that when you remember during the rest of the show. Okay, time for a tune, and I believe this is ERM. And welcome back. Okay, so Billy Joel sounds nothing like REM, but pertinent song nonetheless. Okay, something I picked up on and actually posted in the chat room a couple of days ago. Article I noticed in the UK column regarding our Mr. Cameron's alleged involvement with a French behavioural specialist. In actual fact, probably still have the link that I can post into the chat room again. If you bear with me just a sec. Yeah, okay, and maybe not. Nevertheless, it was an article discussed at some length in the UK column, and basically what it said to me is that we're about to be subjected even more to the psychological aspect of government, and to my mind the best way of guarding against said control is to be aware of what it is they're doing and how they're doing it, and at the same time learn to realise that the very thing that they're going to be using against you is indeed your own mind, our own mind. And what I'll be doing this evening is just dipping your toes into a bit of quantum psychology. And before you go tuning off, it's not anywhere near as off-putting as it sounds. And what I believe are some very pertinent points that will help some of us get our heads around the paradigm shift that's required to be able to wake up to really what's going on, and do what we can to advise others. And this line of thinking will make it easier to converse to those that are not aware of things that we've made ourselves aware of, and will help us to better understand why some of these people that we try imparting information to just aren't willing to take it on board. But to keep it on a fairly light note, rather than jumping straight into the head stuff, I'd just like to recite a little quote from a philosopher by the name of Nietzsche. "The state is the coldest of all monsters, and coldly it tells lies, and this lie oozes even from its lips. I, the state, am the people." Now I think that speaks volumes, and it's well worth pondering over. Now, actually, just jumping back onto our previous topic regarding the good old hemp plant. According to Popular Mechanics, in February of 1938, a new invention would soon make it possible to end the cutting of trees to produce paper for our books, offices and newspapers. Popular Mechanics was so enthusiastic about this invention that they predicted farmers would earn billions of dollars a year making paper this way and would never cut down another tree. And as you look around at our devastated forests and ask yourself what the hell happened in the past 70 years, where did this wonderful invention go? Well, that wonderful invention was a device that made it possible to harvest hemp more cheaply than ever before. Hemp was the chief ingredient in paper throughout most of history. The American Declaration of Independence is written on it. And paper that's made from hemp lasts a good long time compared to paper made of wood pulp. 19th, 18th and even 17th century books, like the original folio of Shakespeare's plays, printed on hemp and are still around, while modern books printed on wood pulp fall apart in only a few decades. I should think a lot of us that are involved in a bit of legal research here and there probably found that one out. You can't always get new editions of books, and sure enough, I think a comparison can be made if you're lucky enough to be in possession of any hemp-paged book and compare it to a wood pulp book of similar age. The books continue to rot away and the forests continue to be destroyed because the government declared war on hemp. They found out that some people smoke it and get happy. Puritanism, to quote H.L. Mencken, is the haunting fear that somebody somewhere might be having a good time. I mean, I'm sure most of you out there have made yourself aware of the multitude of uses that the hemp plant can be put to in regards, well, it's probably easier to list the things that it can't be used for than it is for the number of things that it can be used for, and that's aside its medical uses and its uses as a very healthy food. Anyway, on the subject of governments, George H.W. Bush volunteered to be one of the first Americans to take a urine test for drugs. During the Iran-Contra investigation, Bush refused to take a lie detector test, and as Paul Krasner astutely commented at the time, it appears that Bush doesn't want us to know whether he's telling the truth or lying, but he wants us to be sure he's not stoned while he's doing it. The most widely used urine test in the country detects traces of marijuana and cocaine, but does not detect LSD. This is in reference to America, of course. The corporate structure of the short-term future will therefore thin out the ranks of pot smokers and coke freaks, while the acid heads climb merrily upwards in the hierarchy. This would suggest that the sensuality of grass and the wired aggression of coke will dwindle in power centres, but the morphogenetic, futuristic, evolutionary visions of LSD will play an ever larger role in shaping policy. Think about it. A friend of Robert Anton Wilson's informed him one day that in Silicon Valley there's a ton of weed or grass smoked every day, and that just happens to be where most of the software is written, and was pivotal in the US Star Wars defense program. And Robert Anton Wilson recounts that he didn't believe it himself at first, but worked it out on his computer, showing that the population at the time anyway was 4 million, and assuming that half of them smoke grass and they smoke one joint a day, which is a very reasonable conservative estimate, one comes out with a ton of weed and a heavy fog of cannabis vapor circulating in the belly of the beast. Most of the companies in the Silicon Valley are unwilling to institute the drug tests for cannabis because they know that if they did, they'd lose their most talented, diligent and inspired software engineers. Robert Anton Wilson, who I've probably referred to 3 times in a row now, but warrants it in my opinion. He's a highly underrated guy by most, but for those that have studied him, by and large, he's regarded as a brilliant mind, basically. And I know I've mentioned a few quotes that other authors have made of him, but here's some more. I particularly like Wilson managed to reverse every mental polarity in me, as if I'd been pulled through infinity. I was astonished and delighted. And that was said by Philip K. Dick, the author of a very well-known book turned into a very good movie starring Rutger Hauer, I believe, called Blade Runner. And if the mind behind Blade Runner can say that of another, I think, to my mind anyway, it's well worth a look at. Now, an interesting point to note about Wilson is that he was actually born in America. I actually thought he was born in Ireland, where I believe his ancestral roots come from, but he was actually born in America, Boston, I think he says. But here's a little tale in regards to the Celtic roots of quantum theory that I'd like to share with you. And this is Robert Anton Wilson. We lived in Los Angeles, and I thought I had a movie deal when I wrote this for an Irish magazine circa 1990. As far as I remember, they never paid for it and probably never published it, but I think it deserves an audience, and it seems appropriate for a volume of guerrilla neurolinguistics. The movie deal dropped dead or went into coma too. According to conventional wisdom and or conventional folly, the ontological roots of quantum mechanics lie in German idealist philosophy of the 19th century. But Mr. Wilson here dares to offer a different view. He goes on to say, in the day in 1982 when my wife Arlen and I arrived in Ireland, we tried her battery-operated radio to listen avidly to whatever we might find. Our way of dipping our toes in the new culture before plunging into its alien waters totally. By the kind of coincidence that I don't regard as coincidental, we found an RTE6 interviewer discussing local legends about the puka. For those of you that don't know, it's spelled P-O-O-K-A-H, and I'm sure there's at least one or two in the chat room that will be able to advise you if you don't know. Anyway, discussing this legend about the puka with a Kerry farmer, and as a long-time pukaphile, I found the conversation spellbinding, but the best part came at the end. "But do you believe in the puka yourself?" asked the RTE man. "That I do not," the farmer replied firmly in an Irish accent, "and I doubt very much that he believes in me either." I knew then that I'd indeed found my spiritual homeland, wherever I may otherwise roam, and that Yeats and Joyce and O'Brien had not risen out of a vacuum. We'd planned to stay 6 months. We eventually stayed 6 years. So there's your Robert Anton Wilson, guys. That's what he thought of Ireland, and I've read a fair few of his books, and he continually relates to his experiences in Ireland. Some of them very, very funny. I mean, Robert Anton Wilson is not going to be to everyone's taste, but if you're interested in how the mind goes about constructing our reality, then You don't need to go much further than Wilson. But, a guy called Anthony Burgess once argued that English, American English, and all other varieties of Anglophonics have become rational and pragmatic, closure-oriented. But Irish English remains ludic and aesthetic, open-oriented. The rest of us speak dry prose. The Irish speak playful poetry. I'd prefer to describe all other English as belonging to what neuro-linguistic therapist Dr. Richard Bandler calls the meta model, statements we can logically judge as true or false, and Irish English as belonging to the Milton model, statements not containable in true false logic, but capable of seducing us into sudden new perceptions. The Milton model, named after Dr. Milton Erickson, the greatest therapeutic hypnotist of the 20th century, in the opinion of his peers, contains no propositions subject to proof or disproof, uses language the way that Kerry Farmer did, and can cause both intellectual and psychological transformations. According to the Krzyzewski-Whorf-Sapir hypothesis, the language a people speak habitually influences their sense perceptions, their concepts, and even the way they feel about themselves and the world in general. A change in language can transform our appreciation of the cosmos. The clinical record of Erickson and his school indicates that language tricks can even make us ill or make us well again. The Irish neuro-linguistic system illustrates these theorems uncommonly well. Whether you call it ludic language, Ericksonian hypnosis, or the verbal equivalent of throwing LSD into the linguistic drinking water, Irish English, even in the professional hands of all of Ireland's greatest writers, shows the same non-Aristotelian illogic or Zen humour as that Kerry Farmer. And therein lies a huge clue, because as I take you gently into the yeah, absolutely, Vin. Take you gently into the realms of quantum psychology now, it'll become, will hopefully become readily apparent. Now, don't worry, there won't be a test, but whether you take all this in one go or not, don't worry about it. Just hear me out and see where you are on the other side. Okay, I'd like to introduce you, or those of you that aren't already familiar with E prime, English prime. In 1933, in Science and Sanity, Alfred Korzybski proposed that we should abolish the is of identity from the English language. The is of identity takes the form of X is a Y, e.g. Joe is a truck driver and Susan is a secretary, the universe is a giant machine, etc. In 1949, D. David Borland Jr. proposed the abolition of all forms of the words is or to be, and the Borland proposal, English without isness, he called E prime, or English prime. Excuse me. A few scientists have taken to writing in E prime, notably Dr. Albert Ellis and Dr. E.W. Kellogg III. Borland, in a recent and at the time of writing not yet published paper, tells of a few cases in which scientific reports, unsatisfactory to some but not all members of a research group, suddenly made sense and became acceptable to all when rewritten in E prime. By and large, however, E prime has not yet caught on either in learned circles or in popular speech, and herein lies a big potential for all of us that can get our heads around it. Oddly, most physicists write in E prime a large part of the time due to the influence of operationalism, the philosophy that tells us to define things by operations performed. Few have any awareness of E prime as a discipline, and most of them lapse into isness statements all too frequently, thereby confusing themselves and their readers. Nonetheless, E prime seems to solve many problems that otherwise appear intractable. It also serves as an antibiotic against what Korzybski called demonological thinking. Now, as everyone with a home computer knows, oh yes, the software can change the functioning of the hardware in radical and sometimes startling ways. The first law of computers, so ancient that some claim it dates back to dark eons when giant saurians and Richard Nixon still dominated the earth, tells us succinctly: garbage in, garbage out, or GIGO, G-I-G-O for short. The wrong software guarantees wrong answers or total gibberish. Conversely, the correct software, if you find it, will often miraculously solve problems that hitherto appeared intractable. Since the brain does not receive raw data but edits data as it receives it, we need to understand the software the brain uses. The case for using E prime rests on the simple proposition that isness sets the brain into a medieval Aristotelian framework and makes it impossible to understand modern problems and opportunities. A classic case of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. In short, removing isness and writing and thinking only and always in operational, existential language sets us conversely in a modern universe where we can successfully deal with modern issues. Now, as I said earlier, I'm not expecting everyone to get their heads around it, and don't worry if you haven't so far, because this next bit should explain it in much greater clarity by way of example. I've got some standard English definitions and the English prime equivalents, and in order that they're written here, I'll give them to you. In standard English, the photon is a wave. In English prime, the photon behaves as a wave when constrained by certain instruments. In standard English, the photon is a particle. In English prime, the photon appears as a particle when constrained by other instruments. Another example in standard English: John is bright and cheerful. And in English prime, John appears bright and cheerful on holiday at the beach. Standard English: that is a fascist idea. The English prime equivalent: that seems like a fascist idea to me. Standard: Beethoven is better than Mozart. English prime: Beethoven seems better than Mozart to me. Standard: grass is green. E prime: grass registers as green to most human eyes. Now, I'm hoping that example or series of examples helps get your head around what Robert Anton Wilson, RAW for short, is trying to tell us. Quite simply, by altering the way in which we talk and think and write, in itself will allow us to, for one, minimize the number of conflicts we end up getting into, because not only have we got to teach ourselves to talk and think like this, we have to use the same thought process when we're listening to others. And if they're not speaking in E prime, at least we know perhaps they should be. And in so doing, it gives us greater depth in which to play around with the conversation. or the subject matter in general. You know, using E prime, you're never going to make that absolute concrete belief because I know statement. Because what I'm hoping will be getting through to you is that some very clever minds over the past couple of thousand years or so have been telling us that you know, just when you think you've got it, what you should come to realise is that we haven't actually got anything. We haven't got anything other than our own interpretations of what things are. And after the next break, I'm going to introduce you to to a bit of a head opener, and I'll not tax you any more than that, but I think it's well worth hearing, because again it kind of opens up something in the mind and will hopefully allow some of us to maybe gain a different handle on what this is all about. Anyway, time for a tune, and seeing as I'm not taking requests, I'll just go with what I've got. I'll be back after this. You're listening to tnsradio.com.
John Hurst here, TNS Radio, the place to go if you want the truth.
Encourage the listeners to listen to TNS Radio to learn the truth about what is reality versus illusion. It could save your butt. This is Dr. Rebecca Crowley.
Hello, folks. This is John Kenneth Hutchison, and you're listening to TNS Radio.
Don't let anybody tell you what you should like and enjoy and what you shouldn't like and enjoy. Like what you like, enjoy what you enjoy, and don't take crap from anybody. Hey, I think I just summed up my whole philosophy in 3 sentences.
Welcome back. You're listening to tnsradio.com, and we have a very well organised website and chat room facility at tnsradio.ning.com. For those of you in the north of England, you've got northeasttruth.ning.com, and in Scotland you've got Scottish Sovereigns on the Land.ning.com. Coming up tomorrow night, live at 9 o'clock, we've got the Financial Frontline, and I can announce to you the exclusive use of web camera is allegedly going to be employed during the show. I've had a quick glimpse myself, and it's very impressive setup, and I'm looking forward to that tomorrow. Okay, just catching up with some comments on the chat box here. I believe Richie mentioned maybe logic, maybe it would work better, Mr. C. Yep, absolutely. In actual fact, Robert Anton Wilson is a pioneer of maybe logic, and refers to it himself quite a lot. I'm not sure whether you've actually read him there, Richie, with that comment or not, but certainly fits well. And yeah, indeed, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if these guys aren't very well trained in the use of E-prime. It's very difficult to nail someone down when they're speaking in terms like that, but it's a very good idea to get into the practice of using it. And you know, no matter how well we think we might know, I can assure you, and I include myself in this, every single person on the chat room has fallen into the standard English trap many a time. You know, this is why it's often a better idea, wherever possible, to meet up in person and discuss things out, because the written comment can easily be misconstrued. I believe Mally mentioned that during his show last Saturday. Congratulations to Mally, by the way. I believe it was his first live appearance at Truth Juice up in Liverpool last night. And from what I hear from Dave, it went very well, unless he was referring to Mally plugging his laptop in and blowing fuses that way. But I think not. And at some time in the not too distant future, I certainly intend to be up there and supporting you guys at one in the future. Anyway, getting back into this quantum psychology, a little, and it's only little, so don't worry. Or is it? How long am I going to take you through this then? Yeah, it's not that long. Okay, I'll dive straight in. This chapter, and it's not the whole chapter I'm going to read, I don't think. How many heads do you have? And it's a little psychology experiment. Stems from a comment made by Bertrand Russell. Our knowledge of the external world. I will now demonstrate that the reader or listener has two heads. According to common sense and the consensus of most Occidental philosophers, we exist inside an objective universe, or to say it otherwise, the objective universe exists outside us. Very few people have ever doubted this. Those who have doubted it have arrived inevitably at highly eccentric conclusions. So avoiding eccentricity and accepting the conventional view, how do we know anything about that external universe? How do we perceive it? And for convenience's sake, this is considering only the sense of sight in what follows. But you can check for yourself that the same logic applies if one changes the terms and substitutes hearing or any of our other senses. We see objects in the external universe through our eyes and then make pictures or models of them in our brains. The brain interprets what the eyes transmit as energy signals and will ignore the data that shows that the brain makes a gamble that it can interpret these signals. Very few Occidentals have doubted this, and those who have doubted it all arrived at strange and incredible alternatives. So then, we live inside an external universe and make a picture or model of it inside our brains by adding together or synthesizing and interpreting our pictures or models of parts of the universe called objects. Then it follows that we never know the external universe and its objects at all. We know the model of the external universe inside our brains, which exist inside our heads. In that case, everything we see, which we think of as existing externally, actually exists internally, inside our heads. We're still assuming that the external universe from which we started, we've merely discovered that we can't see it or know it. We see a model of it inside our heads, and in daily life we forget this and act as if the model exists outside our heads. That's if example one, that the model and the universe occupy the same area of space as the map that tries to show all about Dublin would occupy the same space as Dublin itself. And two, that this space exists outside. But the model and the universe do not occupy the same space, and the space where the model exists can only be located inside our brains, which exist inside our heads. We now realize that while the universe exists outside, the model exists inside, and therefore occupies much less space than the universe. The real universe that exists outside but remains unexperienced, perhaps unknown. That which we do experience and know, or think we know, exists in local networks of electrochemical bonds in our brains. If the reader cares to challenge any part of this, she or he, listener even, should certainly try to imagine an alternative explanation of perception. It will appear, or it has always appeared to date, that any and all such alternatives sound not only stranger, but totally unbelievable to people of common sense. I've just been informed my volume needs to go up a bit. Just bear with me while I push one of these sliders somewhere. Hopefully that's a bit better. So, yeah, are you with me so far? I didn't think so. Just stick with it. To proceed, we have now an external universe, very large comparatively speaking, and a model of same, much smaller comparatively speaking, the former outside and the latter inside. Of course, some correspondence or isomorphism exists between the external and internal universes. Otherwise I couldn't get up from my chair, walk to the door, go down the hall and actually locate the kitchen to get a cup of coffee from something I identify as a coffee maker. But where does our head exist? Well, our head obviously exists inside the external universe and outside our brain, which contains the model of the external universe. But since we never see or experience the external universe directly and only see our model of it, we only perceive our head as part of the model, which exists inside us. And certainly our perceived head can't exist apart from our perceived body as long as we remain alive. And our perceived body, including head, exists inside our perceived universe. Right? Just keep going. Thus the head we perceive exists inside some other head we do not and cannot perceive. The second head contains our model of the universe, our model of this galaxy, our model of this solar system, our model of Earth, our model of this continent, our model of our city or town, our model of our home, our model of ourselves, and atop our model of ourselves, a model of our head. The model of our head thus occupies much less space than our real head. Think about it. If you need to go and have a quiet lie down after hearing that, I completely understand. And Wilson himself advises that you retire to your study, if you've got one. Unplug the phone, lock the door, and carefully examine each step of this argument in succession, noting what absurdities appear if you question any individual step and try an alternative. Let us, for Jesus' sake, and for all our sakes, at least attempt to clarify how we can have two heads. Our perceived head exists as part, a very small part, of our model of the universe, which exists inside our brain. We've already proven that, yeah? Our brain, however, exists inside our second head. Our real head, however, exists our real head, which contains our whole model of the universe, including our perceived head. In short, our perceived head exists inside our perceived universe, which exists inside our real head, which exists inside the real universe. Thus we can name our two heads. We have a real head outside the perceived universe, and a perceived head inside the perceived universe. And our real head now appears not only much bigger than our perceived head, but bigger than our perceived universe. And since we cannot know or perceive the real universe directly, our real head appears bigger than the only universe we do know and perceive, our perceived universe inside our perceived head. And it goes on to say that the reader, or in your case the listener, might find some comfort in the thought that Bertrand Russell, who devised this argument, also invented the mathematical class of all classes that do not contain themselves. Anyway, back to the two heads. Lord Russell never carried out this joke or this profound insight beyond that point. But with a little thought, however, the reader or listener will easily see that having analysed the matter this far, we now have three heads, the third containing the model that contains the real universe and the real head, and the perceived universe and the perceived head. And now that we've thought of that, we have a fourth head, and so on, ad infinitum. To account for our perception of our perception, our ability to perceive that we perceive, we have three heads, and to account for that, four heads, and to account for our ability to carry this analysis onward forever, we have infinite heads. A model of consciousness which does arrive very rigorously and with almost mathematical precision of logic at precisely this infinite regress appears in the Serial Universe by J.W. Dunn, who still uses time instead of perception as his first term, but still arrives at the conclusion that we have, if not an infinite series of heads, an infinite series of minds. Now, I'll gently move on from that, but sticking with the entire thought process, what spurred me onto this, bear in mind, was that article in the UK column regarding the behavioural economics, which is really nothing more than, or to phrase it a different way, it's to better help you in what to think. And my thoughts are that in learning how we create rigid beliefs can help protect us from making too many. At least I think so. Now, I hope you're remembering your breathing, pushing out with your stomach as you inhale, and just letting it relax as you exhale. That's ensuring that your lungs are filling up a good capacity of oxygen, and in so doing you've got more travelling to all the muscles and organs in your body, and that in itself makes you healthier. It improves your status of health if you're not already doing this, if you're not a yogi or a boo-boo or a martial arts expert or a practitioner of whatever type of meditation, then you probably aren't doing this unless you're sound asleep, because when you're sound asleep your subconscious is basically fully taken over, and only then will the exterior influences that we experience as stress, pressure of varying degrees, it affects the way we breathe. And this process of breathing is by gently pushing out your stomach as you inhale, also helps to bring down the stress levels. Now, seeing as I'm going to be giving you some more raw material, as it were, over the next show or two, I'm not going to overload you with the stuff at the moment any more than I've already done so, and I'm hoping that some of it's got through. The important thing, other than the breathing, to take away from this, if nothing else, I think, is in realizing that doing nothing more than paying attention to the way we use our language, by not being so forceful in our descriptions, by humbly accepting that all of us to some degree have fallen into the trap of creating a fixed, rigid belief, and when that fixed, rigid belief is called into question, your mind is going to accommodate you completely. Whereas if we can adopt the E prime way of speaking and writing and thinking, it'll put us on a level playing field, at least in regards to linguistics. We might not know all the legal tricks and traps that the judiciary use, but I'm pretty damn sure it puts us into the same kind of mindset that they're using. And if you develop it yourself, then we know never to put ourselves willingly into the position that Roger Hayes has done, although as I think we'd all agree, respect to the guy for the intent behind it. He's not just doing it for himself. He's aware of the scam, for want of a better word, and is using this approach, one, to test the system, and two, to bring to more and more people's awareness just what's going on. And the more of us that get switched on to this, the better, because with larger numbers, things can happen quicker. When there's small numbers, it doesn't mean things can't happen, but the distance between these sovereign minds can play a crucial part. If you're isolated away somewhere on your own, then we need to use the technology that we have to stay in touch until such time as people around the isolated ones have become aware and become our allies, I guess. But to a great extent, we can't leave it to anyone else to inform those around us of what's going on. And in the same breath, if there are those around you that are struggling and in serious need of some direction, then maybe now's the time to put your new found E prime knowledge to use, and maybe broach the subject of debt. It seems to be the financial front that they hit us on in the main, with the flanking assaults on the food and medicinal front. So I think the various topics up for discussion by the various hosts at TNS are sort of organically forming into a nice overall picture of how different parts of the system are threatening our life and liberty, but what we can do to prevent it. And I don't want to turn the topic dark or anything. I did make a note here that I completely overlooked when I first started the show, going back to plants. Something I noted down during Pondman's talk last night, and it's played on my mind before, because I am aware of the fact that a lot of people haven't even begun the process of making provision for a period in which food may be short. So the notes I jotted down for myself, and by all means If I'm not correct on this, someone can post it in the chat box, or Pomman can take up on it next Tuesday. But to my mind, when you from when you start planting, I mean, I know there are plants that will grow much faster, but I think to arrive at any sort of stable type crop that you're going to be able to use to sustain you and maybe store to carry on into the winter, you're looking at a growing period of 3 months. I'm thinking of the potato crop here. 3 months of time. Now, you're not going to survive without food for 3 months. So, I just thought to myself, well, what's going to happen if the system does fall? If it falls flat on its face tomorrow, how long is it going to be before mass plantings actually take place? How long is it going to be before all available food has been taken and used, before people firstly make themselves available of the relevant food seeds, and then organise themselves enough into planting sufficient quantities of seeds to produce a large enough harvest for whoever's involved, because whatever length of time it takes to organise into doing that, you're still looking at 3 months from that point in time, and that's if you just happen to be at an ideal planting time. That's if the season's right. It doesn't really bear thinking about too much if it isn't the right time to start planting. But that message drives home this particular point. I mean, when you take into account that however long it's going to take for people to get organised enough to plant sufficient quantities of seeds during the right season that will allow them to harvest a crop in 3 months' time, you've still got to add that period onto the 3 months, and there is your period of time in which you are going to have to be able to sustain yourself. And quite simply, that means you're going to have to survive 3 months plus the time it takes to get sorted without food, if you haven't already got it, or at worst if you can't find it. And like I say, I appreciate it kind of paints a bit of a dark image on the whole thing, but as I heard Gary say on Monday, hopefully this will never have to happen. We'll never have to do anything but just rotate any stored foods, or happily, healthily from whatever you planted in your own garden. But prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But it's quite a sobering thought when you stop and think. 3 months before you're at the stage where food that or seeds that you've planted and are hoping are going to grow into food, seasonally permitting, and pests and whatnot. Sobering thought. And I've just seen hello Dave. Worthy exercise, this is from Pondman, is to estimate your annual food requirements and target staples. I'm not entirely sure what a office stationery suppliers has to do with food, but I'm sure he knows what he's talking about. And worthwhile, in my opinion. Stop talking about it, stop thinking about it, and actually getting up and doing something about it. I really feel this is the time in which we live. It's the doing year. I think the talking year was last year, which I don't know about anybody else, but for me, 2010 just seemed to fly by. We're in 2011 already. 2012 next year, for goodness sake. Anyway, time is now 17 minutes past the hour of 10 o'clock. It's Mr. C here with some curative thoughts on tnsradio.com. I'll be back with you after this.
Well, if you believe in freedom, you better start listening to TNS Radio. This is Rick Simpson, and thank you for listening.
Stay tuned to tnsradio.com. My name is Albert Burgess.
Okay, folks, this is only 1 minute 25 seconds long, but this is Robert Anton Wilson, and if I've managed to get the right sound clip here, so I was explaining to Dell the other night, it only took me about an hour and a half to cut a 1.5 minute clip from a sound file in Audacity. Yeah, good name for that program, by the way, because it's got the flaming Audacity to mess you around at times, isn't it? Anyway, I appreciate the fact I need some training in that. However, if all's gone according to plan, I can play a little sample of Robert Wilson. I believe he's in Germany during this. I think it's the German accent at the beginning that kind of gives it away. But just to let you hear, where is he? There you are. Just to let you hear what sort of mind the guy's got when put on the spot with a very easy question to answer. Anyway, have a listen.
Nicht garantieren, dass ich das übersetzen kann. Ich glaube, der soll einfach losreden. She wants to know what quantum physics is.
What?
Quantum physics.
What?
Explain it simply, she asked.
Explain quantum physics simply? When I moved from Los Angeles, I moved into what I thought was Santa Cruz. Then we had something stolen from our car, and we called the police, and it turned out we didn't live in Santa Cruz. We lived in a town called Capitola. The post office thought we lived in Santa Cruz, but the police thought we lived in Capitola. I started investigating this, and a reporter on the local newspaper told me we didn't live in either Santa Cruz or Capitola. We lived in an unincorporated area called Live Oak. Now, quantum mechanics is just like that, except that in the case of Santa Cruz, Capitola, and Live Oak, we don't get too confused because we remember we invented the lines on the map. But quantum physics seems confusing because a lot of people think we didn't invent the lines, so it seems hard to understand how a particle can be in three places at the same time without being anywhere at all. But when you remember that we invented all the boundaries, borders, and lines just like the Berlin Wall, then quantum mechanics is no more mysterious than the fact that I live in three places at the same time.
Well, there you go, guys. Robert Anton Wilson himself, and I see from Richie's comments there he obviously does know, and I'm kind of pleased, but not at all surprised. I mean, I think that whether there's anything mystical or spiritual or whatever, I don't know in regards to this, but I certainly have seemed to have been steered interesting path. And maybe the interesting paths that you guys have been steered somewhere along that path will be crucial information to share with your like-minded sovereigns. At least that's how I see it anyway. Anyway, Robert Anton Wilson just giving an easy explanation on quantum physics, and it pretty much comes down to that. You know, it's referring to the lines on the map, as he puts it. What we tend to forget is that we've used we've allowed our minds to be conditioned into a framework, a societal framework, and the powers that be, in our case our governments, are about to be using this for their benefit. And if you cast your mind back to the Nietzsche quote about the state from earlier, in fact it's so fitting, I'm just going to hit you with it again. The state is the coldest of all cold monsters, and coldly it tells lies, and this lie oozes from its lips. I, the state, am the people. Damn lie. But this is how it's been put over to us. Now, arming ourselves with peaceful, logical and intelligent ways of maintaining a lifestyle that, if the system isn't prepared to provide for us, then we'll just have to stick together and do what we can in the way of providing one for ourselves, would by and large be a lot easier to bring to fruition with a few more hands on board. And I know, and I do know from personal experience, that people are hard at work behind the scenes in trying to achieve this. But I don't think it's something we can take our foot off the or our hand off the throttle, even, depending on whether you're a biker or your foot off the pedal if you're a trucker or driver of four-wheeled locomotive thingies. It's important that we start building our communities where we can, and however much of an uphill struggle it seems. And I was certainly at the bottom looking up this time last year in regards to all this, but when I look back at what's happened and the experiences I've been through in the past year, it does kind of make me think just how many people out there are really going through it that haven't found their way to this platform in the rabbit hole, I think is a suitable metaphor for where I'm at anyway. But I know myself the stress that you or we even allow ourselves to be put under, and it all seems to be external because we believe there's nothing we can do. Well, that's what I believe Vince put together this TNS radio for in the first place. He's got his own stories to tell, and if you're a long-time listener or a collector of the podcasts, you'll have built up that picture for yourself, and he recounts some quite harrowing instances that spurred him on into doing what he does on the radio. And I can tell you that while internet radio to most might not seem very much, there is quite a lot involved in it, really. And the standards that are being looked at in TNS radio incur with them a fair old cost. I, at the moment, am speaking to you on a fairly cheap but perfectly functional Logitech headset with microphone, while Vince and some of the other guys, if you could see pictures of well, actually tomorrow night hopefully you'll see a picture of one of the front financial frontline crew, no names, no pack drill, on a web camera, showing you his microphone setup. And it's not for effect. Vince has done a lot of research into this, and just the microphone itself plays such a crucial part of the whole setup. I mean, it's the means by which my voice is being converted into electric signals and transferred to your ears ultimately. And an industry standard microphone, I've just recently been enlightened, as an SM52 or something, that's only about £90-100, and that's just the standard. And if you're not immersed in the system, that means your income from said system is compromised. Now, I appreciate most of us can't fully withdraw from the system. My mind is still pretty much made up on the fact that whatever I can do to withdraw my energy from the system is the least harmful way of achieving my little bit for the cause. The thing is, if there's sufficient others doing the same thing, then our little bits piled on top of each other becomes a force to be reckoned with. It doesn't have to be everybody. It doesn't even have to be half of everybody. I'm not sure what the actual figure would have to be, but if you look at Roger Hayes' example in court that Vince has made available on TNS and has been streaming since early hours of this morning, that, if nothing else, it took up a considerable time in the court. Now, I don't know what the average length of time is for that process to take from beginning to end, but I'm pretty damn sure it was nowhere near the length of time that was spent with Roger there. And I can see these cases, especially if there's been absolutely no response. The letters have gone out and people have just sat on them or whatever. If these things go ahead in someone's absence, where jurisdiction's been granted because of the way you've dealt with the letters from the agencies and the various departments and whatnot, RTS is my adopted method, as it is of most of the people on the TNS site, the return to sender method. Roger Hayes put himself in the court for his own reasons, and while they might not fall in line with our reasoning behind the court scenario, it's certainly delaying the number of cases that they got through that day, and that denies a bit of revenue to the system. And seeing as I don't see the system doing too much in the way of good, then if you're not on board with the sovereign methods, shall we say, although I appreciate that's open to interpretation by whoever it is that's hearing these words, you have to get onto the tns.ning.com site and have a chat with some of us in the chat box there and have a browse around the site to get a better understanding of what I'm saying. But even for those that don't follow those methods, at least they're slowing the system down. Martyrs to the cause, almost. I mean, Roger Hayes' story isn't completely finished yet, but I think, as most of us picked up, that at the very end of the carryings on, there was a bit of and I think Roger would probably admit it himself, he'd done extremely well to stay on his feet, trying to keep his wits about him. At the very end there, he's not done himself too much in the way of favours, but it's not over yet, and respect to Roger for taking it this far. Something that I think, it seems to be happening by and large anyway, but something I think is a good idea is for, if you just have a think or even a search at how many similar groups there are set up in and around us, TPUC, the People's United Collective, are now doing a show on TNS Radio, Fridays or Saturdays, I'm not entirely sure, have a look at the scheduling. But it made me think, how many other similar groups are there out there that we could at least network with, because we're not forcing our way of thinking on anybody, certainly not with the E prime method, right? But it kind of makes sense to me that we network openly with the certain groups, as long as they're of a like enough mind, as long as we're going kind of in the same direction, because what that allows us to do is to tackle a particular point with more force and more energy, along the lines of people being abducted by the system under whatever guise. I appreciate some people don't advocate the phoning of incarceration stations when a law-abiding sovereign has been taken there, against his will. My mind personally, putting myself in the shoes of a desk sergeant or whoever it is that answers the phones in the police station, if you get a string of calls in inquiring about one particular individual, when the chances are the majority of other guests, shall we say, probably haven't had Dicky Bird, at the very least it's going to make me think, well, there's a lot of people interested in the welfare of this character. Let's hope nothing untoward happens, eh? And that thought's going to be there. And I do think it's very likely involved in the earlier release of the individuals involved, and that's something that can be given quite an impact if we're networked with some other similarly minded groups. So if there are anyone or any people out there from like-minded groups that are just listening to this live broadcast or in the form of a podcast, get yourself over to tnsradio.ning.com and sign up, and let's start building this network. And when the circumstances dictate, we can show any interested parties that we are becoming, if not a force to be reckoned with, at least a voice to be heard, and that we will be watching out for each other because we care, not because we're just so heavily into anarchy that nothing else matters. I'm pretty sure everyone I've met personally, they're in it because they care, and they certainly don't care about the financial side of it, at least not firstly. Like I said earlier, I appreciate we're all kind of tied into it to a degree, and who knows, maybe we'll always have to be to a degree. But you can lessen that degree by becoming aware of just how much you're feeding the system, Anyway, I'm not going to tell you how to go about your own lives. That's a decision for each one of us individually to reach. But to my mind, the more people that get on board with the idea that feeding the system is helping perpetuate it, then so much the better. Okay, how are we doing for time? 25 to 11 on Wednesday the 16th of February 2011. I'll just give a quick shout out to everyone on the tnsradio.ning.com site in the chat room. We have Bob, Brian, D. Greer, David Latsky, Delqua, Eddie, Eru, Full Moon, I'm Just Me, Jason, Jim and Lorraine. We have two Johns. I didn't know you could do that. John, Joseph, Liam, Mahatma, Mighty Mally, Mane or Mana or Aman, Mr. Curative, good looking guy that, Mr. Gold, Mrs. Curative, good looking woman, I tell you. My scroll has stopped. Pat Lynch. If I'm not mistaken, Pat used to be a host on TNS as well, unless I've got the wrong Pat. Phoenix, a guy that should really change his name, Plonk. Ponman, Ray Moore, Rob C, Gary, Scottish Sovereign, Seth, bear with me, Soul Dog, Solvener, Soul Kids, Sovereign Richie Man, the Sovereign Bull, How you doing, Bull? Our one and only TNS Radio host Vin, Trisha, and Walking Turtle. I hope you're feeling better, Patty. And if you are, looking forward to your show on Saturday, and hopefully you'll be mentioning something about beer that you didn't mention last Saturday. Anyway, it's good to see you up and about in the chat room. We also have Vincent and Yoda. And you should really get yourself on over there if you've not had your name read out, because that is the people currently in the chat room, all interacting at the moment. So anyone just listening in, now's a good time to get on the chat room and interact with some like minds. So let's introduce you to some music. Now I first heard these people, 2010 went by so quickly, I'm talking 3 or 4 years ago now, but Freeman Fly, who's been interviewed on TNS and will hopefully be back again in a not too distant future. I used to be a frequent visitor to his live radio chat room in the early hours of a Saturday morning, and these are a couple of the songs that he used to play. Now, the band, for those that won't recognise them, is a band by the name of the Flaming Lips, and I was quite intrigued to find out that their style of music is known as psychedelic rock. The tunes I'd heard didn't sound the least bit psychedelic-y or even rocky to me, but I think I've dug out a couple that'll fit the bill. Just happen to be two favourites of mine, and one of them I've actually had to snip out the psychedelic bits because even for my open mind, personally I think they messed up the song with it. But I'm thinking of using one of these two as like the theme tune for this show, and I'll play them both in a second. Maybe you can help me make my mind up about it. This one is the Flaming Lips, Spoonful Weighs a Ton. It's only 1 minute 22 long. Thanks to Audacity for that one. Number 2, and there you have the Flaming Lips. So get used to them anyway, because until I made up my mind which one I'll use for the starter, I'll just have to play them until you tell me to stop using one. But just to let you know, final call's mine. Anyway, I hope Vince's tooth's feeling better and his cold's clearing up. But on that particular point, that drove home something as well. The night he chipped his tooth or cracked it or whatever you did, Vin, I believe it was on a Sunday after your meet-up. What it made me think was, there you are, without, as I understand it, anything suitable to alleviate the distress which you were toughing out, basically, until you availed yourself of some oil of cloves. Now, I know the suggestion was made, but I also appreciate just how easy it is to have clarity of thought with a raging toothache. But one of the foods that's, if I'm not mistaken, growable now is the garlic, and the onion family in general, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And garlic, as Turtles pointed out on one of her earlier shows, is a fantastic little bulb that has been known to quite quickly quell the anguish of toothache, just literally by getting the garlic bulb and gently biting down on it, holding it in place over the affected tooth. And there are a whole host of other similar things that one can make sure that they make themselves available off by either buying the things that have already been grown for you, or planting some at least. And if you live in concrete land, then raised beds and flower boxes at an absolute push will allow you to grow let's just say a medicinal quantity of plants, if nothing else. But this is why I like listening into Pond Man's Ripples from the Ponds shows. This is the sort of thing that it's aimed at. And trust me, with all my interests in things alternative, although I'm aware of a number of plants, one thing I've never developed in my years is green thumbs or fingers. Luckily enough, my other half here has taken to that extremely well. But the information that would allow anyone like me, who has a different colour of fingers to that of green, or at least as perceived by the human eye, the information's being given out regularly Tuesdays between 6 and 9. Now, I don't know if that's going to be changed to 7 to 9. I did make the suggestion last night. Currently 6 till 9. I seem to remember Vince saying something about trying to cut the shows all down to 2-hour slots, which for one thing makes it easier to manage for the host, and another possibly allows for the scheduling of more people that would like to share their thoughts with the internet audience. But in all seriousness, if we've got various things growing in the garden or in the raised beds or your planters that are being grown with a view to being both edible and medicinal, then the acute occasions that will arise throughout our lives, not just directly for ourselves but for those around us, can be dealt with, and very often, in fact, I'll go as far as to say more often than not, more effectively and certainly more healthily than you're going to get from your GP. And I include in that anesthetics of varying kinds. The principles of quantum psychology relates to the mind and how we use our mind to interact in our perceived exterior universe. But in regards to the mind, therein, without the use of any plant, herb or remedy, the mind itself can be used in virtually unbelievable ways to promote healing and to dissipate the sensations of pain. As pain in itself is an electrical signal that leaves the brain, travels down the nerves to the point of injury, back up again, and it's all taking place within the brain, or perhaps within the mind is a more accurate way of describing it. And there are therapies that anyone of a moderate level of education can learn and practice. And one of these therapies is a therapy known as no-EC therapy, which I know I've mentioned before, but if there are any budding practitioners of alternative health or medicine out there, I urge you to look into that no-EC therapy, employed by a Spanish surgeon initially by the name of Angel Escudero, who does teach it all over the world, with the exception of the UK, due to a falling out with the one guy in the UK that is actually allowed to teach it. And I think his name is Keith Jones, who runs, let's say, a basic introductory schooling into various forms of alternative therapies. It was my first step, actually, was through this chap, and then facilitating the use of his Institute of Holistic Therapy's insurance, to be fully compliant. Makes it a lot more affordable than trying to set up being fully compliant on your own. And although you can certainly learn this method elsewhere, as I understand it, in the UK, legitimately speaking, he's the only person that's allowed to teach it outside of Escudero's own. But that is an absolutely phenomenal demonstration on just what we don't know about what our minds can do. And this is something that has been tried and tested over a telephone, and it is virtually instant pain relief. Now, there are obviously circumstances in which you wouldn't want to give someone instant pain relief, no matter how tempting, but for the likes of a toothache or an injury or a situation where the damage is obvious, and masking it by removing the pain isn't going to be life-threatening, then this is the sort of thing that we need to be sharing around. And I, for one, am more than happy to share it with those of you that want to listen and hear what I've got to say on the various topics. But around Vince, I do know that there was a number of people, albeit if they had nothing but whiskey to offer in the means of coping with your sore tooth or whatever it might be, a network was available. And I don't know if that's where the oil of cloves came from, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that had Vince some garlic growing around the property, therein would have lain a pretty immediate solution to the, or temporary solution anyway, to the tooth problem. Now, I've had plenty of experiences with dentists over my years, and I can assure you not many, if any, could be regarded as pleasant, and some positively at the far end of that scale. The topic of Marathon Man came up during Vince's writhing with his tooth, which I did feel a bit for him for, because the thought of a pseudo dentist, Nazi or otherwise, drilling into your teeth without any anaesthetic doesn't do the old thought processes much good when you're already feeling a similar level of pain. But let's start making the effort in enacting some of these things that we're sharing about here. Whether it's in planting food or making yourself available to the teachings of a alternative health teacher in a proven regard. I don't know all of the alternative therapies out there. I do know that there are some that I wouldn't want practiced on myself, but only some. The majority of them are well worth exploring, and like most things, word of mouth is often the safest way to ensure that you're going to be receiving treatment of a high enough standard and an honest enough standard to be truly beneficial. But time's almost up again, folks, and if I'm not mistaken from what I've seen in the chat room last time I looked at it, Vince is going to be hosting a on-air call-in, and be interesting to see how that goes. I may even partake myself, who knows. But once again, thanks for listening. This is Mr. C with some more curative thoughts, and remember, 9 to 11 tomorrow night, Thursday night, we've got Financial Frontline, and all the schedules are available for checking through a link at the top of the chat box on the .ning.com site. This is tnsradio.ning.com, and I'll play you out with the TNS jingle and one last tune. Nice talking to you folk, and I'll speak to you again same time next week.
Listening to TNS Radio. This is Shauna Banda.
My name is Dr. Judy Wood. You're listening to TNS Radio, radio that tells the truth.
My name's Andrew Johnson. You're listening to TNS Radio because you want the truth.